The first day I walked into that office, I already felt like I didn't belong there. It wasn't anything obvious. Nobody was rude. Nobody ignored me. If anything, people were polite. Too polite. The kind of polite that keeps a distance, like they've already decided you won't last long enough to matter. I remember standing near the entrance, adjusting the strap of my bag, scanning the open space. Glass walls, clean desks, that quiet hum of keyboards and low conversations that made it clear everyone already had their place. Everyone except me. New guy. I turned to see a woman smiling at me, holding a coffee mug like it was part of her personality. Yeah, I said. First day. Good luck, she replied lightly, already half walking away. You'll need it. She didn't say it like a warning, more like a fact. That should have been my first sign. I got set up at a desk near the middle of the floor. Not too visible, not too hidden. That weird neutral zone where people pass by, but don't really stop. I spent the first hour pretending to read onboarding documents while actually watching everything around me. Who talked to who? Who laughed? Who got ignored? And who people avoided? That's when I noticed him. Amos. I didn't know his name yet. I just noticed the pattern. Conversations would lower slightly when he walked by. People didn't greet him the way they greeted each other. Not hostile, just careful, like they didn't know what to do with him. He wasn't loud, not intimidating, just quiet in a way that didn't feel weak. Focused, sharp, the kind of person who looked like he saw more than he said. At one point, our eyes met for a second. He didn't smile, but he didn't look away either. Then he just nodded once, like he'd already decided something about me, and went back to whatever he was doing. I didn't think much of it at the time. I should have. Around midday, things started to go wrong. It was something small, a report I was supposed to update. I followed the instructions I'd been given, double-checked everything, and sent it off. 10 minutes later, my manager was standing at my desk. This isn't right, he said, tapping the screen. My stomach dropped instantly. I followed the template. You didn't, he cut in. Look at this section. Completely off. I stared at it, confused. It looked exactly like the example I'd been given. Maybe I misunderstood. This is basic, he said, not raising his voice, which somehow made it worse. We can't afford mistakes like this. I felt every pair of nearby eyes pretending not to watch. Fix it, he added, then walked away. My face burned. Not just from embarrassment, but from that sinking feeling that maybe I really had messed up something obvious. Something everyone else understood except me. I sat there, staring at the screen, trying to figure out what I'd done wrong. That template's outdated. The voice came from my left. I turned. It was him. Amos. Up close, he looked different than I expected. Not cold, just tired maybe, like he'd seen this exact situation too many times before. What? I asked. The template, he repeated, nodding at my screen. They never updated it. You used the old format. I blinked. But that's what they gave me. Yeah, he said simply. They do that. I frowned. Then why did he? Because it's easier to blame you than admit the process is broken. He said it so casually it took a second to register. You're serious? I asked. He gave me a look. You think you're the first person this happened to? I didn't answer. Because, honestly, I had thought that. He reached over, not touching me, just pointing at the screen. Change this section, he said. And this. Then resend it. He won't say anything after that. I hesitated. Why are you helping me? That made him pause. For just a second. Then he shrugged. Because you didn't deserve that. Something about the way he said it, flat, certain, hit harder than I expected. Thanks, I said quietly. He nodded once again, like earlier, and went back to his desk. No small talk. No introduction. Just that. I fixed the report the way he showed me. Sent it again. And just like he said, nothing. No follow-up. No correction. Like the mistake had never happened. But it had. And so had he. The rest of the day passed in that same strange rhythm. Small confusions. Half-clear instructions. Moments where I felt like I was always one step behind everyone else. And every time something like that happened, Amos noticed. Not immediately. Not obviously. But always just before things got worse. At one point, I overheard two coworkers discussing a task I'd been assigned incorrectly. I was about to walk into a conversation I clearly wasn't prepared for when Amos spoke up from across the room. That's not his responsibility, he said. They both looked at him. Yes, it is, one of them replied. Amos didn't even raise his voice. No, that's under your team. Check the assignment sheet. There was a pause. A quick check. Oh, no apology. Of course. But the situation disappeared before it reached me. I sat there, pretending not to notice, pretending not to understand what he'd just done. But I did. And it kept happening. Subtle. Precise. Always at the exact moment I was about to get pulled into something unfair, something unclear, something that would make me look incompetent. He stepped in. Not for attention. Not for credit. Just quietly fixing things before they landed on me. By the end of the day, I couldn't ignore it anymore. As people started packing up, I stood there for a second, watching him, trying to figure him out. Because this wasn't normal. People don't go out of their way like that. Not in a place like this. Not for someone they just met. I grabbed my bag, hesitated, then walked over to his desk. He looked up before I even said anything. Yeah, he asked. Straight to the point. I rubbed the back of my neck. I wanted to say thanks. For earlier. And everything else. He studied me for a moment. Like he was deciding how much to say. Then he leaned back slightly in his chair. You should be more careful, he said. That wasn't what I expected. Careful, I repeated. They test people here, he continued. See who breaks. Who stays quiet. Who pushes back. I frowned. And you? His expression didn't change. I don't like watching people get set up to fail. Something about that answer felt incomplete. Like there was more behind it. But why me? I asked. That made him pause again. Longer this time. His eyes held mine, steady, unreadable. And then he said something that stayed with me long after I left that office. Because I know what it looks like, he said quietly. I didn't understand what he meant. Not yet. But I was going to. Because for some reason, Amos had already decided I mattered. And I had no idea why. I didn't expect to keep thinking about him after that first day. Usually, when something awkward happens at a new job, you go home, overthink it for a few hours, then wake up the next morning pretending it never mattered. Fresh start. New version of yourself. But this felt different. Not the mistake. Not even the way my manager handled it. Him. Amos. I kept replaying those moments in my head. The way he stepped in without making it obvious. The way he spoke like everything was already clear to him. Like he'd seen this exact pattern play out before. And especially that last thing he said. Because I know what it looks like. I didn't know what that meant. But I couldn't shake it. The next morning, I got to the office earlier than I needed to. Not on purpose, at least that's what I told myself. I just didn't want to deal with walking in when everyone was already settled again. When I stepped inside, the space felt different. Quieter. Less performative. And he was already there. Of course he was. Same desk. Same posture. Focused, like the rest of the world didn't exist unless it needed to. I hesitated for a second, then walked past him toward my desk. Morning, I said, trying to sound casual. He looked up. There was that same steady look again. Not surprised. Not overly friendly. Just aware. Morning, he replied. That was it. No follow-up. No small talk. But somehow, it didn't feel cold. I sat down, opened my laptop, and tried to focus. Today would be better. It had to be. I already knew a little more. I wouldn't make the same mistakes. Right? Wrong. By mid-morning, I was already in trouble again. This time, it was a meeting. I'd been added to it last minute. No context, no prep. Just a calendar invite and a vague subject line. I assumed I was there to observe. Apparently, I was wrong. So, Gabriel, someone across the table said, turning toward me. Can you walk us through your approach here? My brain stalled. My approach. Yes, he said, slightly impatient. The update you've been working on. I glanced at my screen, heart racing. There was no update. Not one I knew about. I think there's been a misunderstanding. I started carefully. I wasn't told. You were assigned yesterday, he interrupted. I wasn't. You need to stay on top of things, my manager added, not even looking at me. That same heat from yesterday crawled up my neck again. Same pattern. Same feeling. I opened my mouth, trying to figure out how to defend myself without sounding incompetent. His access wasn't set up. The room shifted. I froze. Amos. He wasn't even supposed to be leading this conversation, but suddenly everyone's attention tilted toward him. He couldn't complete the update. Amos continued calmly, because he didn't have access to the necessary files. That's on the system setup, not him. There was a pause. Someone frowned. Is that true? A few clicks. A quick check. Yeah. Looks like it wasn't granted. Silence. Then just like that, the tension dissolved. All right. The same guy said, clearing his throat. We'll revisit this tomorrow. No apology. Again. But the pressure was gone. The meeting moved on like nothing had happened. I barely heard the rest of it, because my focus was locked on one thing: him. After the meeting ended, people started filing out. I stayed seated for a second, staring at my laptop like I needed a reason to breathe normally again. "You're too quiet." I looked up. Amos was standing next to me. "I what?" I asked. "You let them talk over you," he said. "Not harsh, just direct. If you know something's wrong, say it clearly." "I tried," I muttered. "They didn't exactly give me space." "They won't," he replied. "You take it." I exhaled slowly, running a hand through my hair. "Easy for you to say." He studied me for a moment. Then, quieter this time. "It wasn't at first." That caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he glanced around the now empty room, then back at me. "I was you," he said simply. Something in my chest tightened. "When I started here," he continued, "same things happened. Bad instructions. Missing info. Then they watch how you handle it. And if you don't," I asked, "they decide you're not worth the effort." The words landed heavy, because that's exactly how it felt. I leaned back slightly in my chair, processing that. "So what? You just figured it out." A small pause. Then, I stopped waiting for things to be fair. That wasn't comforting, but it was honest. We sat there for a second in silence. Not awkward, just real. Then I asked the question that had been building since yesterday. "Why are you helping me?" This time, he didn't deflect, didn't shrug it off. He held my gaze, steady. "Because no one helped me," he said. That hit harder than anything else. Not dramatic, not emotional, just truth. And suddenly, everything about him made more sense. The way he noticed things. The way he stepped in at the exact moment something crossed a line. The way he didn't make it a big deal. He wasn't trying to be nice. He just refused to let it happen again. To someone else. I swallowed, feeling something shift inside me. "Still, you don't have to do that." "I know." "Then why do it anyway?" Another pause. But this one felt different. He looked at me like he was weighing something. Like he wasn't sure if he should say it. Then, quietly, "Because you remind me of myself." My chest tightened again. I didn't know what to say to that. Didn't even know how to respond. So I didn't. We just stood there for a moment. The space between us feeling closer than before. Not physically, just different. Then he stepped back slightly. "You'll be fine," he said. It sounded less like reassurance, and more like a decision. Like he'd already chosen to believe that. And for some reason, that mattered more than anything else anyone had said to me since I got there. After that conversation, things didn't suddenly become easy. If anything, they became clearer. And clarity, I quickly realized, can be uncomfortable. I started noticing everything. The way instructions were given differently depending on who you were. The way certain people got the benefit of the doubt while others, like me, had to earn it from zero every single time. And the way Amos always noticed before I did. It wasn't obvious to anyone else. But to me, it was starting to feel intentional. Like he was watching out for me. Not in a loud, protective way. Just precise. A few days later, I was working on something that actually made sense for once. I double-checked everything, cross-referenced files, even asked a question ahead of time so I wouldn't get caught off guard again. I was ready. Or at least, I thought I was. "Gabriel." I looked up. My manager again. Same tone. Same unreadable expression. "Come with me." My stomach dropped instantly. I followed him into a smaller meeting room. The kind with glass walls that made privacy feel fake. There were two other people already inside. Not a good sign. "Close the door," he said. I did. Then he turned to me, holding a printed document. "This," he said, tapping it, "is your submission?" "Yes," I replied, already feeling that familiar tension creeping in. "It's incomplete." My mind raced. "Incomplete how?" "This section is missing data," one of the others added. I stepped closer, looking at the document. It wasn't missing. It was exactly how it was supposed to be. "No," I said carefully. "That section pulls automatically from." "It doesn't here," my manager cut in. I felt it again. That setup. That quiet shift where suddenly, I was on the wrong side of something I didn't fully understand. "I checked everything before submitting," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Well, you missed something," he replied. There it was. That same pattern. Blame first. Clarity later. If ever. I opened my mouth again, ready to defend myself properly this time. Because the data source wasn't connected. All three of them turned. So did I? Amos was standing at the door. I hadn't even heard it open. My manager frowned slightly. This doesn't concern you. It does if you're reviewing incomplete output without checking the source connection. Amos replied calmly. No hesitation. No apology. Just fact. The room went quiet. One of the others leaned forward, clicking through something on their laptop. He's right, they admitted after a moment. The data feed wasn't active. Another pause. Then, all right, my manager said shortly. Fix the connection and resend. That was it. Again, no acknowledgement. No correction of how that situation just went. Just moving on like it hadn't happened. But this time, I wasn't just relieved. I was starting to feel something else. Frustration. Because this wasn't random. And Amos stepping in. That wasn't random either. The meeting ended quickly after that. The others left first. My manager didn't even look at me on the way out. I stayed for a second, staring at the table. Then, next time, speak faster. I looked up. Amos was still there, leaning slightly against the wall, like he'd been part of the room the whole time. I was about to, I said. You hesitated. Because they cut me off. They always will. I exhaled sharply, more frustrated than I meant to be. Okay, I get it. I'm not as fast as you. That's not what I said. Then what are you saying? For the first time, there was a slight edge in my voice. Not at him. At everything. But it landed anyway. He straightened slightly, watching me more carefully now. I'm saying, he replied, quieter, that you know when something's wrong. You just don't trust yourself enough to hold that ground. That hit. Harder than anything else he'd said. Because it wasn't about them. It was about me. I looked away for a second, jaw tightening. I'm new. I'm trying not to mess things up even more. You're not messing things up, he said. I let out a dry breath. Feels like I am. A pause. Then, you're not, he repeated. They just expect you to think you are. Silence settled between us. And for a second, I didn't feel like the confused new guy. I felt seen, which was somehow worse. Because now I couldn't pretend anymore. I looked back at him. You always do that. What? Steppin' like that. He held my gaze. Only when it matters. And this matters? Another pause. Slightly longer. Then, yes. Something about the way he said it made my chest tighten again. Not because of what he did, but because of how certain he sounded. Like there was no question in his mind. I swallowed, trying to steady myself. You realize people are going to notice, right? They already have. That wasn't surprising. What happens then? I asked. They'll adjust. That doesn't sound reassuring. It's not supposed to be. Of course it wasn't. I shook my head slightly, a small, disbelieving smile slipping out despite everything. You're kind of intense, you know that? That was the first time I saw it. A real reaction. Not a full smile. But something close. Only when necessary, he said. Yeah, well, I muttered, grabbing my laptop. It's a lot. I moved toward the door, but he spoke again before I could leave. You didn't thank me this time. I stopped, turned back. I didn't need to, I said. His brow lifted slightly. No, no, I replied, holding his gaze. Because you didn't do it for thanks. Another pause, and this one felt different, quieter, closer. He studied me for a second longer than usual, then gave a small nod, like I'd just said something important. Good, he said. I left the room after that. But the feeling didn't leave with me, because something had shifted, not just in how things worked in that office, but between us. At first, he was just someone who stepped in, then someone who understood. Now, it felt like something else was starting, something I couldn't quite define yet. But I knew one thing for sure. Amos wasn't just protecting me from the job anymore, and I wasn't just noticing him because of what he did. It was becoming personal, and that scared me more than anything that had happened in that office so far. After that day, I stopped telling myself it was just work, because it wasn't anymore. I tried to keep things normal, focus on tasks, improve faster, stay ahead of whatever traps this place seemed to set for people like me. And to some extent, it worked. I made fewer mistakes, or at least, fewer things they could twist into mistakes. But the real change wasn't in my performance. It was in how aware I had become of him. Amos wasn't always near me. He didn't hover, didn't check in, didn't act like we were suddenly anything. But I felt him, across the room, in meetings, even in silence. It got to the point where I could tell when something was about to go wrong, not because I'd figured it out myself, but because I'd catch him already watching, like he was waiting to see if I'd handle it, or if he needed to step in again. And I started asking myself something I wasn't ready to answer. Was he still protecting me? Or was he waiting for me to stop needing it? A week later, I got my answer. It was another meeting. Of course it was. But this time, I wasn't caught off guard. I knew the topic. I knew the material. I had even prepared answers in advance, just in case. I was ready. At least, I thought I was. Gabriel, my manager said, glancing at me. Walk us through your numbers. I nodded, opening my file. Sure. So the projection is based on. That doesn't align with last quarter. The interruption came fast. Too fast. I felt it, that old instinct to pause, to second guess, to adjust myself before I'd even finished speaking. But then, I didn't. I kept going. It doesn't align, I said calmly, because last quarter included variables that aren't present here. Silence. Not long, but long enough. My manager leaned back slightly. Explain. So I did. Clear. Direct. No over-explaining. No apologizing for existing. I spoke for maybe 30 seconds. That was all it took. A quick glance around the room. A few nods. All right, someone said. That makes sense. And just like that, it was over. No correction. No tension. No setup. Just done. I sat back slightly, heart still beating faster than I wanted to admit. But I didn't look at him. Not immediately. Because I didn't need to. For the first time, he hadn't said a word. The meeting continued, but I barely registered it. Because something had shifted again. This time, it wasn't him stepping in. It was me not needing him to. And somehow, that felt just as intense. When it ended, people started leaving, conversations picking up like nothing had happened. I stayed seated for a second, then stood. And this time, I looked at him. Amos was already watching me. Not surprised. Not impressed. Just steady. Like he'd been expecting that. I walked over before I could overthink it. Well, I said, trying to keep my tone light. Well, what? He replied. I exhaled a small laugh. You didn't jump in. You didn't need me to. That's simple. I nodded slowly. Yeah. A small pause. Then he added, quieter. That was better. I don't know why that affected me as much as it did. Maybe because it wasn't exaggerated. Maybe because it was real. Or maybe because it came from him. Thanks, I said. He tilted his head slightly. You're thanking me for not helping you. I'm thanking you for everything before that, I admitted. His expression shifted just slightly. Not softer, but a less guarded. You figured it out, he said. I'm figuring it out, I corrected. Another pause. Then, that's enough. There it was again. That certainty. Like he didn't need things to be perfect. Just real. We stood there for a moment longer than necessary. Neither of us moving. Neither of us breaking it. And that's when I noticed something new. It wasn't just that he was watching me differently. It was that I was watching him too. Not as the guy who kept stepping in. Not as the one who understood the system. But as someone I wanted to understand. Can I ask you something? I said. He didn't hesitate. You just did. I rolled my eyes slightly. You know what I mean. Go on. I hesitated for a second. Then, why did you really start helping me? He didn't answer right away. Which, at this point, I recognized as a sign that the answer mattered. Finally, he said, I told you. You said I remind you of yourself. I do. That's not the full answer. His eyes held mine. Longer this time. Like he was deciding whether to cross a line he'd been holding. Then, it's different with you. My chest tightened slightly. Different how? I asked. He exhaled slowly. Like he wasn't used to explaining things like this. Most people either break, he said, or they adapt by becoming like everyone else here. And me? You didn't do either. I frowned slightly. I definitely felt like I was breaking. You didn't, he said. The certainty in his voice again. You just didn't know where to stand yet. That landed deeper than I expected. And now? I asked. Another pause. Then, now you do. Silence. But not empty. Full. Like something had just been acknowledged between us that neither of us could ignore anymore. I swallowed slightly, my voice quieter now. So what happens now? That question lingered. He looked at me differently this time. Not like he was analyzing. Not like he was deciding. Just looking. Then he said, that depends on you. That wasn't the answer I expected. What does that mean? I asked. It means, he replied, I'm not going to stand between you and this place anymore. I nodded slowly. Okay. But, he added, that doesn't mean I'm stepping away. There it was. Clear. Simple. And somehow heavier than anything else he could have said. I felt my chest tighten again. Not from stress. From something else. Something I was just starting to understand. Good, I said quietly. He held my gaze. Then, good, he echoed. And for the first time since I started that job, I wasn't just trying to survive it anymore. I was starting to want something from it. Not the position, not the approval, not even the stability. Him. And I had a feeling that was going to complicate everything. After that conversation, nothing changed. And at the same time, everything did. We didn't suddenly start spending time together. Didn't sit next to each other more. Didn't turn into something obvious that people could point at. If anything, from the outside, it probably looked like we barely interacted. But I felt it. Every glance lasted half a second longer. Every silence between us wasn't empty anymore. And the worst part? It didn't feel one-sided. That's what made it dangerous. Because now, I wasn't just noticing him. I was waiting for him. A few days later, it happened again. Not a mistake. Not a setup. Something worse. Recognition. I was in the break area, pouring coffee I didn't really need, when I overheard two coworkers talking behind me. Yeah, Amos always does that. Does what? Picks someone. Watches them. Fixes things for them. I froze. My hand tightened slightly around the cup. What do you mean picks someone? The other asked. He's done it before, the first guy said. New people. Struggling ones. He steps in, makes them look better than they are. That's weird. Yeah. Doesn't last though. Something in my chest dropped. Why not? Because eventually they mess up for real. And then he stops. Silence. Then a quiet laugh. Guess we'll see how long this one lasts. I didn't turn around. Didn't say anything. I just stood there, staring at the coffee like it had suddenly become the most important thing in the world. But inside, everything shifted. Because for the first time, I wasn't just thinking about what Amos meant to me. I was thinking about what I meant to him. Was I just another case? Another person he decided to fix? Another version of himself he didn't want to watch fail again? I hated how much that thought got to me. Later that day, I couldn't focus. Not properly. I kept replaying that conversation. The tone. The certainty. He's done it before. Which meant, this wasn't unique. I wasn't unique. By the time the day was ending, I was already exhausted. Not from work. From overthinking. I grabbed my bag, ready to leave before I spiraled any further. Gabriel. I stopped. Turned. Amos. Of course. You're leaving early, he said. I finished everything. I replied. That's not what I meant. I exhaled slowly. I'm just tired. He studied me for a second. Then, something happened. Not a question. A statement. I hesitated. I could have brushed it off. Said it was nothing. But for some reason, I didn't want to. Can we talk? I said. That seemed to catch him slightly off guard. Not much. But enough. He nodded once. Yeah. We didn't go far. Just outside the building, near the side entrance where it was quieter. The city noise filled the gaps, but it still felt private. I leaned against the wall, arms crossed, trying to figure out how to even start. He waited. Didn't rush me. Didn't interrupt. Just there. I heard something today, I said finally. What? About you. That was enough to shift his expression slightly. Go on, he said. I looked at him. Really looked. Trying to read him the same way he always seemed to read everything else. They said you do this, I continued. That you pick people. Help them. Fix things for them. Silence. He didn't deny it. That hurt more than I expected. And he asked. And? I swallowed, my voice tightening slightly despite myself. They said it doesn't last. Still nothing. No reaction. No defense. Just that same steady look. That I'll mess up eventually, I added. And then you'll stop. The words felt heavier out loud. More real. More personal. Finally, he spoke. Do you believe them? That wasn't what I expected. I don't know, I admitted. That's the problem. A pause. Then, you should decide based on me, he said. I let out a quiet, almost frustrated laugh. That's not exactly easy when you don't explain anything. He stepped a little closer, not invading space, but closing it. I helped you, he said. That part is true. I know. I've helped others before, he added. There it was. Clear. Honest. It hit exactly where I expected it to. So I'm just another one, I said. Something shifted in his expression then. Finally. Not anger. Not frustration. Something quieter. No, he said. I frowned slightly. Then what am I? He didn't answer right away. And this time, the silence felt heavier than usual. Like whatever he said next would matter. A lot. I was going to stop, he said. That caught me off guard. What? After the first few days, he continued. You started figuring things out. You didn't need me the same way anymore. That's what you said before, I replied. Yes. Then why didn't you? Another pause. But this one felt different. More exposed. Because for the first time, he didn't look completely in control of the answer. Because it stopped being just about that, he said quietly. My chest tightened. About what? I asked. About helping. Silence. I felt my heartbeat pick up. Not from nerves. From understanding. Slow. Unavoidable understanding. And now? I asked softer this time. He held my gaze. Didn't look away. Now, he said, I notice you even when there's nothing to fix. That was it. That was the moment everything changed. Because there was no way to misunderstand that. No way to explain it away. The air between us felt different now. Closer. Heavier. Real. You could have just said that, I murmured. He almost smiled. Would you have believed me? I didn't answer. Because honestly, no, I probably wouldn't have. We stood there for a second longer. Neither of us moving. Neither of us breaking it. Then I said the thing that had been sitting in my chest since the break room. So you're not going to just stop? His eyes stayed on mine. No, he said. Simple. Certain. And somehow, that meant more than anything else. I nodded slowly. Good, I said. My voice was quieter now, but steadier. Because whatever this was, it wasn't one-sided. And it wasn't temporary. Not anymore. After that conversation outside the building, going back inside felt unreal. Like we had said something we weren't supposed to say. Not in a dramatic way. Just too honest for a place like that. We didn't walk in together. That would have been too obvious. Too easy to notice. But I felt it the second we stepped back into that office. The same space. The same people. Except now, everything between us had a weight it didn't have before. And I had no idea what to do with it. For the rest of the day, we barely spoke. Not because we were avoiding each other, but because we didn't need to. That was the strange part. At one point, I caught his glot across the room. No expression. No signal. Just that same steady awareness. But now I understood it. And that made it harder to ignore. By the end of the day, I wasn't thinking about work at all. I was thinking about him. About what he said. I notice you even when there's nothing to fix. That line kept replaying in my head like it had settled somewhere deeper than it should have. I grabbed my bag, trying to leave before I overthought it again. Gabriel. I stopped. Turned. Of course. Amos. Again. But this time, something felt different. Less controlled. Yeah. I asked. He hesitated. Actually hesitated. Which, at this point, I knew was rare. Are you going straight home? He asked. The question caught me off guard. Not because of what he asked, but because of how he asked it. Carefully. Like the answer mattered more than it should. I was planning to, I said slowly. Why? A small pause. Then, walk with me. Not a question. Not quite a request either. Something in between. I studied him for a second, trying to read what this was. But for once, I couldn't. Okay, I said. We left the building together this time. Not side by side at first. Just close enough. The evening air was cooler, quieter. The kind of calm that makes everything feel more real. We walked in silence for a minute. 2. Maybe more. And weirdly, it wasn't awkward. It felt like both of us were thinking the same thing. Just not saying it yet. You overthink, he said suddenly. I let out a quiet breath. You're not wrong. I can tell, he added. Is it that obvious? Yes. I huffed a small laugh. That's embarrassing. No, he said. It's just loud. I glanced at him. My thoughts are loud. To you, he replied. It shows. That made me quiet for a second. Because he wasn't teasing. He was observing. Like always. Is that a bad thing? I asked. Another pause. Then. No. Simple. Again. We kept walking. The city moved around us, but it felt distant. Like we were slightly outside of everything else. After a moment, I said, I meant what I said earlier. He looked at me. About what? About not knowing what to believe. He nodded slightly. I figured. I don't like not understanding where I stand. I admitted. You do now? I glanced at him. Do I? Yes. No hesitation. Of course. I shook my head slightly. You say things like that like they're obvious. They are. To you. He didn't deny that. Instead, he said, then ask. That stopped me. Ask what? What you're actually trying to understand. My chest tightened slightly. Because I knew exactly what that was. I just wasn't sure if I was ready to say it out loud. But at this point, we were already past careful. What do you want from me? I asked quietly. He didn't answer immediately. And for once, that made me nervous. We stopped walking. Not planned. Just happened. He turned slightly toward me. And now there was no distraction. No movement. No escape from the moment. I don't want anything from you, he said. That wasn't the answer I expected. Then what is this? I asked. His blood didn't waver. This is me not ignoring something I don't want to ignore. That hit. Hard. Which is? I pushed. A pause. Then. You. There it was. Clear. Direct. No way around it. My chest felt tight again, but not in a bad way. Just full. You don't make this easy, I muttered. I'm not trying to. Of course he wasn't. I let out a breath, looking away for a second before meeting his eyes again. You know this is complicated, right? Yes. You know people at work are already talking? Yes. And you still? Yes. I stopped, because there was no hesitation, no doubt, no backing down, just that same certainty. And suddenly, I was the one hesitating. He noticed. Of course he did. You can take time, he said. That surprised me. I'm not rushing you. That surprised me even more. Then why does it feel like you already decided everything? I asked, a slight shift in his expression. Not defensive, just honest. Because I know what I feel, he said. That was it. No overcomplication. No confusion. Just clarity. And somehow, that made things harder for me. Because now I had to face what I felt too. I exhaled slowly, running a hand through my hair. This wasn't part of my plan, I admitted. He almost smiled again. It rarely is. I looked at him. Really looked. And for the first time since all of this started, I didn't see the guy who had everything figured out. I saw someone who had just decided not to pretend anymore. And that made something inside me settle. Just a little. Okay, I said. He didn't respond. Didn't push. Just waited. I don't know what this is yet. I continued. But I don't want you to stop. That was as honest as I could be. For now. And it was enough. Because he nodded once. Good, he said. Same word as before. But this time, it felt different. We didn't say anything else after that. We just kept walking. Closer now. Not touching, but not distant either. And for the first time since I started that job, I wasn't just trying to survive the environment. I was stepping into something I actually wanted, even if I didn't fully understand it yet. Especially because I didn't. After that walk, nothing felt accidental anymore. Not the way he looked at me. Not the way I started looking for him without even thinking about it. And definitely not the silence between us. Because now, it wasn't uncertainty. It was awareness. The next few days at work were strangely calm. No setups. No mistakes. No situations where Amos had to step in. At first, I thought maybe I'd just gotten better. Then I realized. They had adjusted. Not to me. To us. It was subtle. People didn't say anything directly. But the tone shifted. The way they spoke to me. The way they hesitated just a second longer before trying to corner me into something unclear. And the way they looked at him. Like they were recalculating. Like they were trying to figure out if it was worth it. I noticed it. And so did he. You see it too, I said one afternoon, leaning slightly against the edge of his desk. He didn't look up immediately. Just finished what he was typing. Then, yes. That's because of you, I added. No, he said. It's because of how you respond now. I frowned slightly. That's not the whole truth. It's enough of it. I studied him for a second. You always do that. Do what? Give partial answers. That almost got a reaction. Almost. Because you already know the rest, he said. I exhaled quietly. You're frustrating. I know. There was a pause. Not awkward. Just close. Closer than we used to allow. You don't have to stay careful with me, I said. That made him look at me. Properly. I'm not, he replied. You are, I said. Just differently. His blood didn't move. What do you want me to say, he asked. There it was again. Direct. No room to hide. I hesitated for a second. Then, I want to understand how much of this is real to you. Silence. But this time, it wasn't heavy. It was focused. He leaned back slightly in his chair, still watching me. All of it, he said. No hesitation. No overthinking. Just truth. My chest tightened slightly. Even if it makes things harder here? I asked. Yes. Even if people keep talking? Yes. I let out a quiet breath. You really don't care, do you? I care about what matters. And this matters? Another pause. But softer this time. Yes. That word again. But every time he said it, it felt heavier. More real. I nodded slowly, looking down for a second before meeting his eyes again. Okay. And that was it. No dramatic shift. No sudden change. Just a quiet understanding settling into place. Later that same day, something happened that made everything clearer. Not for me. For everyone else. We were in a team discussion, more informal this time. People standing, talking, throwing ideas around. I was explaining something. Not perfectly, not confidently, just speaking. And for once, no one interrupted. Not because they suddenly respected me, because they were watching him, waiting. And when he didn't step in, when he just stood there, listening, letting me speak, something shifted. They adjusted. To me, not him. And that's when I realized he wasn't protecting me anymore. He was standing with me. And somehow, that mattered more. After the meeting, I caught up with him near the hallway. You did that on purpose, I said. What? You didn't say anything. I didn't need to. That's not what I meant. He looked at me. You let them see, I said quietly. See what? That I can handle it. A pause. Then, yes. Simple. Of course. I shook my head slightly, a small smile slipping through. You're impossible. And yet, he said. And yet, I echoed. We stood there for a second. Closer again. Always closer now. There was no hesitation anymore. Not really. Just timing. And maybe a little fear. But not the kind that pushes you away. The kind that makes you careful with something that matters. Gabriel. I looked up. His voice was quieter now. Different. Yeah. A small pause. Then, come over tonight. Not rushed. Not uncertain. Just said. My heart skipped slightly. Not because I didn't expect it. Because I did. I just didn't expect it to feel like this. What for? I asked, even though I already knew the answer didn't really matter. He held my gaze. To not do this here. That was enough. More than enough. I nodded slowly. Okay. And just like that, something shifted again. Not in the office. Not in how people saw us. But in us. Because whatever this was, it wasn't staying in the spaces between work anymore. And for the first time, I wasn't scared of that. I was waiting for it. I spent the entire evening pretending I wasn't thinking about it. It didn't work. No matter what I did, scrolling through my phone, turning on something in the background, even trying to focus on anything remotely productive, my mind kept going back to one thing. Come over tonight. It wasn't just the words. It was how he said it. Calm. Certain. Like this was the next step, and he wasn't questioning it. And somehow neither was I. By the time I was standing outside his building, I realized something else. I wasn't nervous in the way I expected. I wasn't questioning if I should be there. I was just aware of what this meant, of what had already been building between us, and of the fact that there was no going back to how things were before. I knocked. A second later, the door opened. Amos. No surprise there. But seeing him like this, outside of work, in his own space, without that constant layer of control he carried in the office, it hit differently. Hey, I said. Hey. That was it. No awkwardness. No hesitation. I stepped inside. His place was simple, clean, quiet in a way that felt intentional, not empty. Like everything there had a purpose. Like him. I set my bag down, taking in the space for a second. You live alone? I asked. Yes. Figures. That almost got a reaction. Almost. Why? He asked. I shrugged slightly. You don't seem like someone who shares space easily. That's accurate. I smiled faintly. Yeah, I thought so. There was a short silence. But not uncomfortable. Just new. Because this wasn't the office. There were no interruptions here. No roles to play. Just us. You can sit, he said. I glanced at him. Very welcoming. I'm working on it. That made me laugh quietly, and some of the tension eased. I sat down on the couch, leaning back slightly. He stayed standing for a second longer than necessary, like he was deciding something. Then he sat down too. Not far. Not too close. But closer than we'd ever been outside of those quiet moments at work. And suddenly, everything felt louder. Not the room. Not the city outside. Just this. The space between us. You're quiet, he said. So are you. I usually am. Yeah, I replied. But this feels different. A pause. Then, it is. That honesty again. It made it impossible to pretend this was casual. I turned slightly toward him. So what happens now? I asked. He looked at me. Really looked. And for the first time since I met him, he didn't answer immediately. Not because he didn't know. Because he was choosing how to say it. We don't pretend this is nothing, he said. My chest tightened slightly. Okay, I said. And we don't rush it into something it's not yet. That surprised me. You don't want to rush it? I asked. No. I studied him. You seemed pretty sure before. I am, he said. About you. That didn't help my heartbeat at all. But this, he continued, gesturing slightly between us, should be something we understand while it's happening. That was very careful, intentional, real. I nodded slowly. That makes sense. A small pause. Then I added, quieter. I don't want this to disappear. His gaze didn't waver. It won't, he said. Not I think. Not probably. Just, it won't. I believed him. That was the problem. Or maybe, that was the reason this mattered so much. We sat there for a while after that, talking. Not about work. Not about anything heavy. Just normal things. But even that felt different. Because there was no distance anymore. No pretending we were just coworkers. At one point, the conversation slowed. Naturally. No awkwardness. Just quiet. I looked at him. He was already looking at me. And this time, neither of us looked away. There was no question in it. No confusion. Just understanding. I'm glad you didn't stop, I said softly. He didn't ask what I meant. He knew. Me too, he replied. And that was enough. No big moment. No dramatic shift. Just two people sitting in the same space, fully aware of what had been building between them, and choosing not to ignore it anymore. Later, when I stood up to leave, something felt different again. Not uncertain. Just changed. In a way that didn't need to be explained. I'll see you tomorrow, I said. Yes. I hesitated for half a second, then stepped closer and pulled him into a brief hug. Simple. No overthinking. He didn't hesitate either. Just held it for a moment. Then let go. Good night, Gabriel, he said. Good night, Amos. I left after that. Walking home, the city felt quieter than usual. Or maybe, I just felt clearer. Because for the first time since I started that job, this wasn't about surviving. It wasn't about proving anything. It wasn't about not failing. It was about something real. Something steady. Something that didn't need to be hidden, fixed, or questioned every second. And I knew one thing for sure. Amos didn't just step in to protect me. He stayed. Because he wanted me. And now, I wasn't going anywhere either.